Hello and welcome to the second episode of Flap Podcast. I am the host, Oberheiden-Brent, and today we will be talking again about Robin Williams' last dramatic film role in Boulevard, and today we have a co-host with us, which is Jens Reinke. So hello Jens, are you there?
Hi, I'm there.
Okay, great. Maybe we just start with you introducing yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Jens Reinke. I'm the co-host of Flap Podcast. This is actually my debut here at the podcast series. And I thought, and Andrea thought it's a nice idea to start off with some little more information about Boulevard. Same as Andrea, I studied literature and film studies at Kiel University, and I'm currently working as an art historian at an art and antique furniture dealership in Kiel.
I can admit to the fact that we already discussed Boulevard, of course, before we started to record this episode. It has been a while, though, and maybe you just give us a short summary of your thoughts on it, or your experiences with the film when you watched it. What were your thoughts on it?
Let me start off by saying that I was not as much into the career and the works that Robin Williams did as Andrea was, as I did not watch, the entire body of his work. So I am aware of him, of course, as everybody was, and as everybody else was. His sudden death shocked me, obviously, but I did not have the context of Boulevard, especially being the last film, or where to place it in Robin Williams' total works. So I watched it. Really...
dramatic role. I mean, he did other things after that, but that's the last dramatic role. Yeah.
All right, last dramatic. I mean, big feature film,
right.
Screened on different movie festivals and so on. So I really watched it from a fresh perspective, a blank sheet of paper, almost you can say, that I watched it without much information beforehand, and I found it to be a very interesting, very, dramatic, very captivating movie that doesn't leave you cold. There are some, as you mentioned in your last Flap podcast, there are some, criticisms you can mention or you can say to that movie, but nonetheless, it was a great experience watching it, and it's a good film.
Yeah, I think it's a nice little independent movie, which has great actors in it, if you think about it, and overall a great story. I mean, it's not a bad story. I mean, there are some tiny things, if you want to be picky, you could criticize, but overall, I think it's a good film.
It's a good film, yeah. Here's something that comes to my mind, because during the course of my studies, I had the specialization on the parts of, culture or movie or literature where you have an intersection between technology and the human being, where things like airplanes, like trains, like cars, like computers, like the internet influence humans, and you observe as a cultural scientist how the humans behave around those items of technology. Specifically, of course, with a certain research interest in science fiction literature and speculative fiction, but nonetheless, the car as an iconic piece of technology, and especially for the American culture, is fascinating to me. So when I watched Boulevard for the first time, and when I reflected on it, I couldn't help it but thinking, he's driving what kind of car? I mean, Robin Williams' character, Nolan, he's driving an old Mercedes-Benz.
And that's the funny thing. I want to make a brief interruption, because that's the last thing I was seeing. So that's a good what's the word? I mean, a good addition, actually, because I pretty much focus on the characters and not on this at all. But when you said it, or now when you say it again, of course, it's yes. I mean, I know what you want to say, I think, but that's something I didn't focus on. That's quite interesting to discover something new.
Yeah, I mean, it's this car focus that might be pretty specific to my point of view, but in some cases, think about Breaking Bad. You can really make a characterization about all the people in Breaking Bad due to the cars they drive. So that's
right.
I thought it might be a good thing to apply this principle on Boulevard. And he's driving an old Mercedes. Mm-hmm. Mercedes is a foreign luxury brand. So at some point he must have had the money to purchase that car. It's well maintained. You don't see dirt. You don't see any broken parts. It's a well maintained luxury car, but it's old fashioned. It's not the current or even remotely current model. It's a foreign luxury brand. It's a well maintained car. It's clean. You don't see any dirt or any technical defects on the outside of that car. No dents, no bumps. But still, it's an old car. It's at least 15 years old. And look at the job.
If I may interrupt again, as you said, it's a foreign car, just like like he and Joy like to watch foreign movies. So that's another thing.
He's cultured. He's a very cultured person. He's
open-minded.
Educated.
Yeah.
And he speaks French, and
right.
So that's absolutely that's a high level of education. Plus the job at his bank. Let's call him a bank clerk or a bank manager, for lack of a better term. But he certainly, at some point during his career at this bank, or at the specific branch of this bank, he must have earned enough money to be able to purchase that car, which, of course, in the United States, it's a Mercedes. Mercedes is expensive everywhere, but there, of course, it's even more expensive than in its domestic market. So at some point, his career must have been pretty good.
Yeah, he definitely does not have any financial problems, considering how much money he offers Leo all the time. So, yeah.
But at some point, it stagnated. And in the same way that he stuck with that car, although it's a good car, but he didn't change it, he didn't renew it. He stuck with it for, in my estimation, at least 10 years, 10, 15 years, if you look at the car, and there is no change in that. And I think that's a symbol also for his life and for his relationship with Joy, as there is no change. And yet again, the car, as a tool of individual freedom, allows him to do what he does, driving around at night and, well, picking up Leo.
And making this U-turn. Also, there is another parallel in the film. As I said before, that this film works with a lot of parallels or contradictions. There is change ahead of him, not just because he makes the U-turn and other things, but also like the promotion, the potential promotion he's supposed to get at his job. So there is, changes in the air, so to speak. And when you mentioned, this old car and no change and everything, that makes me think of the fact that Nolan also parks at the same spot all the time, no matter what the situation. And of course you could think, well, that's his designated spot, that's for him as an employee at the bank, but I looked at it, there is no sign that says, this is his license plate is there or anything where it says he's supposed to park there. I think he has the freedom to park everywhere he wants. It's just a habit. It's a routine. And it's another thing that stands for Nolan. His life is a life of routine. Think about the fact how every morning he brings this cup of tea to his wife into her bedroom, for example. His life is full of routines. Of course, we all do that to some extent in our everyday lives, but of course this is a movie, and here, of course, it means something. And notice also when he starts to break the routine by, first of all, of course, to make the U-turn and then meeting Nolan and Leo, but he is late at his work for the first time ever, apparently, because it's something so unusual. His boss says it's so unusual, so it makes you think that must have been the first time. He said, "I overslept." And the boss says, this is so unlike you. So usually he is, functioning very well. No change, always routine and nothing else. No change. And I think that's what makes it so remarkable at the end, that he actually does escape, or that he actually breaks free from that routine. And also, considering his age, that late in life that he does that. So that's, I think, quite remarkable. And in some ways, this is similar to Winston, as you pointed out, also a character I kind of overlooked, or at least what I saw was pretty much just that I didn't find the friendship convincing, and I didn't find this whole parallel of him also having to face changes in his life too much into your face, not subtle enough. But you had an interesting observation when it comes to Winston.
Well, I think in a way, I agree that it's not that subtle. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Thing is that Winston, played by Bob Odenkirk, who, by the way, is amazing in his role, plays this college professor who, at least on the outside, is a very, let's say, manly or dominant or embracing life character with his very young, I mean, half his age or less than half his age girlfriend.
But also a little cynical and bitter, if you think about it. I mean, cynical.
He is bitter, and cynical, I guess, and I suppose that's some sort of a clue that, in a way, he sympathizes with Nolan, as he is, first of all, he's his friend, for better or worse. Let's just believe it, they're friends. And I don't think that the Bob Odenkirk character is perfectly happy in his position and in his relationship,
especially in his job. He definitely does not. Yeah.
As Nolan,
right?
In a way, he's stuck. So there's a strong similarity between both of them, although they are in very different positions, and although they are very different people, both are unhappy. And a solution for Bob Odenkirk's character is that he is courageous, that he does make a change to go to New York.
Like Nolan. Nolan is also brave in that sense.
Exactly, like Nolan. So in that way, while the Bob Odenkirk character seems to be more in control, more in charge of things, because that's the way he, gives himself in the world, that's the way he acts in front of others, as a very, as I said, dominant, assertive character.
He's more open. He doesn't hide anything like Nolan does. That's for sure. I mean, he has nothing to hide, really.
And yet still, he is unhappy. And I thought this to be an interesting observation.
And interesting is as many parallels as there are, there's also an opposition. Again, as I said before, this film works so much in parallels and oppositions or contradictions, whatever you call that best. Nolan is leaving his wife, and Winston actually commits to his relationship to this young girl. He moves to New York with her. So that's the complete opposite. They both need to change something in their life, but one leaves the wife and the other one commits to the relationship with the girlfriend. Something else I noticed when I watched this film over and over again, especially with Winston, he does say one sentence several times. He does say, just two guys talking, right? After the restaurant visit, and then at the end when they have this, when he knows Nolan is gay and everything. And it makes you wonder, because Winston mentioned before, they wanted to move in with each other in New York, so maybe Nolan, because they didn't do that because of Nolan. He said, you met Nolan, Winston says to Nolan, you met Joy, literally, so that's the reason why it didn't happen, that they moved in with each other. So maybe Nolan rejected that. I mean, that's speculation, of course, but it makes you think, because Winston says this, just two guys talking. So it's clear Winston is not gay, of course, and when he says, just two guys talking, so maybe he had an idea of Nolan wanting something else, and Nolan felt that, Winston didn't want that, so that it was time for them to separate in some way. They still were friends, of course, but they didn't move in with each other. They didn't follow their dreams, so to speak. So maybe that's the reason. Because it makes you think that Winston says this several times. I mean, it must mean something that you keep saying, just two guys talking, right? And as much as I like this parallel story of Winston, now that you focused a little bit more on Winston, of course, because I focused more on Robin Williams and on Nolan, of course, and on Joy and Leo. I do like that. I do like this parallel plot, if you want to call it that, with parallel similarities and contradictions. But I think I still have this feeling that this is not, especially the scene when they, at the end, Winston goes to New York and Nolan says, this is what's happened and now I live on my own. It's just so, as I said before, this is not really played in the present, so to speak. Now, it's more like a summary of the movie and then bringing across the message and rubbing it into your face. I still find this not very subtle. And maybe the reason for that is because there are too many plots. You have, I think the essential main plot or relationship is Joy and Nolan, but you also have Leo and Nolan, you have Nolan and Winston. Maybe it's too much, and the film cannot handle all of these things, all of these relationships to the same extent, of course. So I liked what they did with. I liked how it is very convincing with Leo and Nolan and Joy and Nolan, but this with Winston and Nolan, I don't know. It's interesting what we don't see or the hints, but when it becomes very obvious at the end, then it's just weird because it's not played. It's just. Something like, they didn't have more time to really tell their story, and it's so obvious at the end. It's still subtle in some ways, but very obvious in the main way. And I still don't like that. I thought at first I was too harsh, but I really just don't like this. I think I should trust my feeling there. But it's still interesting, and that's because with this film, as I said in the previous episode, I find it so difficult to make a review at all. That's why I don't want to call it really a review, because there's so many emotions involved, which have a lot to do with, of course, Robin Williams' suicide and all that. So that's why I would be so interested. To hear what other people are thinking about the film, and I tried to find some people who watched the film, but it seems like nobody's really ready to share their thoughts on it, which is understandable too. I mean, that's at least my experience. That many people said, "Yeah, I watched it, I liked it, and everything," but I don't really want to, it's. They didn't say it's not time to talk about it yet, but they just those people I was approaching were not really ready to share their thoughts on it yet. So maybe in the future we have a third episode on the film. Who knows? It's something else I mentioned in the first episode, something that I really have very little doubts about as far as my feelings and even reasonable convictions, is this drug dealer's character. He was so weird. And when you saw him, I mean, when I saw him, it felt like, God, that's just too much. It's over the top. And I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Too much acting, or although it didn't feel that it's a bad actor, but I don't know if it was if the writing was doing this to him, to this character. I don't know, but it just felt like too much. But you had a different feeling about that, right?
Well, let's not say that Breaking Bad is the one and only benchmark for portraying drug dealers in quality television or movie series. But if you look at the social milieu they're operating in, and if you look at the possible side effects that drug abuse has on your brain, and it's pretty obvious that drug dealers very often are drug users themselves, and we're talking here, although to the best of my knowledge it's never mentioned, but I'm sure we're talking about something like meth or crack or whatever.
Yeah.
That this hyper tense, physically and psychologically abusive character isn't totally over the top. I think it's a possibility.
I like his talking and everything, his princess and all that stuff.
I think, well, he's, as many drug dealers do with their clients, and especially if there's a mutual dependence. Of course, they need his drugs and he needs their money, and so on. It's a power play.
They shot it in Tennessee, I believe. Yeah, but still, even if you do encounter people like that in real life, which might be a possibility, I still think, that's a film, this is fiction, and somehow this character doesn't have to fit to the rest of the movie, because everything is stylized or constructed. And I would have just... Because he sticks out, and it's just weird. I mean, it has to fit somehow to the... this is, as I said before, it's fiction, it's not reality. It's not like a documentary on, drug dealers of Tennessee or anything. So it has to fit more or less to the rest of the film. He can still be different, because his character, of course, is different, but I think it's too much. But that's a minor thing. I mean, if you look at the whole movie, it's just a tiny thing where you really want to be picky. It's just something you emotionally noticed or so. But it's nothing where you say, oh, this is so bad, you stop liking the film, or you say it's a bad film. I mean, I don't want to go that far. It's just a tiny thing. I found it's not really fitting. Yeah, I would be interested to know how you felt about the fact that Nolan does leave Joy at the end, or what are your thoughts on the character of Joy in general?
Well, I think it's mentioned in the movie that she likes to have her own dream world in a way, as does Nolan. So I think what they're doing, the separation in a way, is, well, they do have to live with the consequences of their actions. So I guess in that
and decisions, choices. They both make choices. Yeah.
They both make choices, and in that respect, they're, I mean, pretty, straightforward, so to say. In the very end, she goes to this travel agency to book, or at least to look for cruises,
right?
Which I think, if you look at the concept of, a cruise as a holiday, and the entire cruise industry is yet another escape. But maybe that's the escape that fits for her. That's
interesting. Yeah. I read that Robin Williams actually was concerned that because his character does leave Joy at the end of the film, that the audience would stop sympathizing with him. Mm-hmm. And at first, when there was this scene when he comes home, when he sends her to his boss, the meeting because of the promotion with his boss and the regional director or whatever, right? But then he's going to see if Leo's okay because of a drug overdose. He gets this phone call from the clinic, so he leaves Joy alone. She has to go there by herself, and then he only comes home late. She's already back from that dinner, and she's angry, disappointed, sad, and everything, and afraid in a way. This is where I felt, oh God, do you really have to leave her? Also, like, she's running after him, saying, you don't have to leave. I'm just. She knows it. I mean, she also says, are you going to be with him? They never talked about it, but she knows that Nolan is gay and that she cannot give him what he needs. But she still hopes that she would be enough. So that's the moment where I thought, oh God, poor Joy. But then it pretty much stops at the end of the conversation when Nolan says that it's time for us to be in the real world. And she says, but what if I don't want to be in the real world? Yeah, that's why I married you. And this makes pretty much a difference, because I read, completely unrelated to the movie, in a forum somewhere on the internet, it just came up, the topic of homosexuals being closeted and then getting married, having a traditional life and everything. And people were talking about how unfair that is to the wives or husbands, because they're betraying them, they're lying to them if they don't know, the partner is gay, so they're doing this. And yeah, that is bad. I mean, then after 20, 30, 40, whatever, how many years, you leave that person, and that person pretty much wasted their life on someone who never really loved them that way. But this is different here. I mean, you cannot be mad at Nolan, or you cannot really hate him or dislike him, because he never betrayed Joy. She knew from the very beginning he was gay. They just made a commitment, and it didn't work for both of them. If they both, just Nolan happens to be the first one to be honest about it and wants to talk about it. She mentions before, we're separated. How much more separated can we be? She wants to go on the cruise with him. She wants to have a close relationship to him, and she just chooses not to be in the real world. I mean, literally. She reads books. She likes films and all that. She has, as you call it, she's in her little dream world, and Nolan wants to get out of this. And at the same time, he sets her free too. It's also a brief discussion I had with the author of the film on YouTube, where he said that audiences should not feel sorry for Joy, because he and Nolan sets her free at the end. It's a good thing for her. She finally can also live a true life. So if you want to be, if you want to say that with a little pathos or so, I mean, she literally finds joy at the end of the film. Like, her name is Joy. She was also not happy in this relationship. She was just hoping for it to change, and it was just dreaming. having illusions, but she knew better. So she made this choice. She wanted to marry him because of whatever reasons. I mean, she didn't want to be in the real world. Maybe she loved him. I'm sure they love each other in some way. I mean, they say that to each other. And I think it's authentic, it's credible, but not in a way, you would love a partner of, I don't know, also physically. I mean, they're very distant in a way.
Yeah.
Not spiritually, but of course physically. She herself indicates by saying, by trying to make Nolan go on that cruise with her, and by saying, I don't know how much more separate we could be, that she does want change. She just doesn't have, if you want to say, the guts to do it. I mean, Nolan does it for her, but she also, if you think about it, all the characters in the film want change. It has to happen. Leo, Winston, Joy, Nolan, they all want change. And it's just the question who does it and what decision is being made, what choice is being made, and sometimes someone has to make that choice for you, especially when it comes to relationships. So Nolan decides that for Joy, that this, everybody needs to walk into different directions, and he sets her free by that. As I said, this is what the writer said. Nolan sets Joy free, and many critics or reviewers didn't see that, but I think that's quite obvious. I mean, that I didn't go out of the film and think, oh, that poor woman. I mean, I had this brief moment before, but at the end I didn't feel like, oh, that's sad. It's not a classic happy ending, of course, but for the characters, it's all good. It all works out well. Probably also for Leo. We don't know what he's up to, but he probably, he had this overdose and he left the clinic, so maybe he also changes something. He left the cell phone there. Maybe he makes a complete change as well. Who knows? But it's not a movie where you think, oh, what a horrible ending. It's so sad. It's depressing or anything. I don't think it is. Yeah, I think we can wrap this up now. I think that's pretty much what we both wanted to share as far as our thoughts go on that film. If anyone else has anything to add, again, we're very happy to discuss this any further, as I'm very interested in how other people perceive this film.
Same here. If there's more to add, just write us in the comments. Very interested to see what you have to say, what your opinion is about this, and thank you very much for watching.
All right, and I might add, you can reach us on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, on Twitter you find us also, Flap Podcast, and of course on our actual Flap Podcast website, www.flap-podcast.com. So there is, even if you just Google us, you will find a way to find us and contact us, and we'd be very happy about it. Okay, so for now, then that's it, and thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.